Welcome to What's Best Forum's Masters and Makers interview series. I'm Ron Resnick. If you enjoy this video, please kindly click like and please subscribe to my What's Best Forum YouTube channel. Today we are meeting Ed Meitner, founder of EMM Labs, and Ed's son, Amadeus, manager of production and social media, as well as their long-term partner, Mariusz, managing engineer. Good evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Amadeus, what is your role at the company exactly as manager of production and social media?
That's kind of a funny title, I think. At EMM Labs, we're still a family-owned and operated company. We have a team of 9 employees, and therefore, with a company with the product catalog that we have, you tend to have to wear many hats, as we like to say around here. So I think my role is a mixture of both business development, sales and marketing, along with our director of sales, Shahin Al-Rashid, and production, daily operations, outward-facing customer support, you name it, basically I do it.
Mariusz, how do you and Ed work together on a day-to-day basis? Do you design certain elements of a circuit and Ed handles other elements, or do you literally draw the schematics together? What's the actual process working together?
Well, we have to put some distinction between digital part and analog part of the product. My prime responsibility is digital side of the product, digital signal processing, and that's the core of the thing. We always collaborate on interface and the principal problems. My part is the digital signal processing. And firmware, I have to add.
And Mariusz, have you and Ed written the schematic for every component yourselves, or do you ever work with outside designers?
This is all in-house design. There is no parts of schematic that we outsource.
Amadeus, who physically solders and assembles the components? That's among the 9 people in-house?
We use a contract manufacturer for pick and place. We design all of our own circuitry. We get our circuit boards made, obviously outsourced. And then we have a company, a contract manufacturer here in Calgary, who we work with for the physical soldering of the SMDs, the chips, and whatnot. There is some parts of our product that we do solder in-house, and it involves a selection process for certain components within our products. But most of it is done from our contract manufacturer, who has much more ability to handle the volume than we do in our small little facility here.
Your website says that EMM Lab's focus has always been singular, quote, creating music production and reproduction equipment that's unerringly faithful to the music itself, unquote. Ed, how do you tell if the sound of a component is faithful to the music itself?
I don't know how to answer that because, most modern components are definitely faithful to the music. The only sensitive component would be coupling capacitors, but we don't use any, so we don't have to worry.
When somebody buys an EMM Lab amplifier and preamplifier and DAC and streamer, what are you hoping that client achieves in his listening room? What is your company's philosophy that you're trying to achieve sonically with your components?
I offer the best transparency I can imagine, and I hope that the customer is happy. That's all I can say.
Ed, do you believe that higher resolution and greater retrieval of detail in the playback of a recording is always a good thing?
No. What do you mean by detail?
Well, for example, a microphone recording a performance at Walt Disney Concert Hall is going to be hearing much more detail than a listener 20 rows back in the middle of the concert hall.
I don't control that. That's in the recording.
Well, some audio components focus on maximizing resolution and maximizing...
But not ours. It's an overall system. It's not some focus on some magic thing, which we don't even know what it is.
I think what Ron is asking, I can answer in a simple way. We don't have a sound. What we want to do is faithfully reproduce what the original recording intended. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. I mean, Ed has always said, since I was a small child, he's not in the music business, he's in the sound business.
You conveyed to a reviewer who asked you that question, Amadeus, Ed's reply there. Ed's belief is that we are in the sound business, not the music business.
Exactly.
So what does that mean, though, in the context of the audiophile industry?
Well, it means I don't care what the audiophile is listening to in terms of music. I don't care what I have to listen to in my work. And music's not my business. Music is my work. I don't get attached to it. I'd rather watch TV.
Ed, in your design process, when you think about objective measurements versus subjective sound qualities, how important to you are objective measurements versus subjective sound qualities?
Both of them are important.
And so when you're evaluating a new component or a new circuit, how do you decide whether the subjective sound qualities you're hearing are what you're seeking to achieve?
Well, I know what I have. I know where the problems are. So the next one won't have some of those problems. Somebody will listen to it. It's the worst thing for a designer to listen to his own stuff. It's a no-no. You don't get romanced by your own design.
Do you have a full stereo system at the factory where you listen to components?
Well, of course I do.
So you're listening to your own system, so you must decide, well, I like the way this sounds or I don't like the way this sounds.
Yeah, what I have set up is for the time being, I like it. Tomorrow I might not.
Mariusz, for preamplifier volume control, why do you all prefer the sound of your voltage-controlled amplifier over a discrete resistor array with fancy resistors or a transformer to attenuate gain?
That question I will bounce back to Ed. Ed is the definite inventor of this voltage-controlled. It's rather digital controlled, but it's similar idea of the voltage or volume control in the amplifier, preamplifier. So I bounce it back to Ed. You can ask me about volume control in a DAC, which is totally in a digital domain, but that's perhaps later.
Ed, why have you chosen the voltage controlled amplifier over?
It's not a voltage control. Who says it's a voltage controlled amplifier?
I'm sorry, I thought that's what you called your proprietary.
No, it's a digitally controlled R2R ladder as a simple term. It's not a voltage controlled amplifier. It has nothing to do with amplification.
That's the method of attenuation in your preamplifier.
And gain, yeah.
Signal goes through analog components,
Yes,
but the gain is controlled by digital means. But signal path is analog.
I see.
And it's pretty proprietary to our design. I don't want to talk about it because this is a sore point in this industry.
Okay. I know that in your preamp, all of the outputs can be used simultaneously, so they're not in simple parallel. How are you buffering each of the outputs so they can be used simultaneously?
We have a resistor coming from a very low impedance. The single-ended resistor is different than the balanced ones, but they all come from a very low impedance source, so they are buffered by the nature of the beast.
I know that your MTRX2 version 2 amplifier outputs 1,000 watts. How many MOSFET output devices are in that output stage?
4 doubles per rail. So that's 4 times, so that's 8 times 8 amps is 64 amps is the maximum output current.
That's the output current, but how many actual MOSFET devices are in that?
I just said it's 4 doubles. It's a package that has 2 MOSFETs, so there's 8 MOSFETs
I see.
per rail.
And I want to add something. That's 1,000 watts RMS stable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dynamic power, we're pushing 1,800 watts or more.
Well, let's say 1.5 kilowatts.
Do you feel there's any sonic compromise in a design that outputs that much power versus, for example, if you were targeting 100 watts output, might that lower power amplifier be more organic in some way?
If you built a 100-watt design and then expected to get 1,000 watts with small components, small conductors and stuff like that, then that's a bad thing. But if you have 1,000 watts that's built for 1,000 watts, then I don't see the difference.
So there's nothing about the...
As a matter of fact, you definitely have better control over your speaker.
So there's no advantage to a lower power amplifier design, perhaps in greater nuance or delicacy or something?
Usually there's no advantage to audiophile myths. We're in the 21st century.
Okay, but there are plenty of audiophiles that like low power tube amplifiers.
That's okay, that's fine.
I don't think it's a myth. In your amplifiers, I believe that you power the lower gain stage with a switching power supply, and you power what you call the power stage with a linear power supply. Is that right?
Yeah.
What's the reason for using a different type of power supply with each gain stage?
because how to treat the power is completely different from supplying a regular voltage that's low noise and stable and stuff. Two totally different applications.
And so why do you feel the switching power supply is the right solution for the...
Because it's efficient and low noise.
So the low noise power supply is the better solution for the early gain stage.
But it's always a good solution, but it depends what kind of noise. In the high power stages, we're not really so concerned about 60 hertz or 50 hertz or 120 hertz, whereby we'd be very concerned when we have a gain stage of, say, 30 dB, then we're concerned about that. So it's a different application, doesn't draw much current, 10 milliamps, 15 milliamps, sometimes 20 milliamps, but really not much current.
Is there any gain stage or any component at all in which you feel a tube is the right device to use for subjective sonic reasons?
Tube? Like a fire bottle?
A valve.
Fire bottle.
So
No, I don't
The answer is no. The answer is no.
This is really not, I don't know about the tube guys. It'd be very difficult to get decent tubes these days. That's what I hear. So I don't know if it would be an advantage. I personally have no idea about that.
So tubes are nothing you've never really explored, either engineering-wise or just...
Well, of course I did in my youth. I built lots of tube stuff. I hated it.
Okay, fair enough. When people listen to a system and find it fatiguing over time, what, in your experience, are the sources of that fatigue typically?
CDs, well, mostly Red Book CDs.
You have your DAC to make the CD sound good.
Well, we try to do the best that can be done with it. It's been proven over time that it seems to be effective. We actually did have some medical proof from the psychiatry department with many, many subjects of what works for stimulation and what doesn't in the audio business. And we did this during the time of the SACD project. Turned out that SACD worked fine. Red Book produced the opposite effect. It would irritate people. And of course, tape and LP and cassette and all that works just fine, because noise in most cases is really not a consideration. Because when the things get going, we don't need 120 dB of signal to noise, ever, for nothing. And in fact, this is a backfire because we play to the whims of the reviewers that measure and will crucify a solid state piece of equipment if it has the kind of signal to noise and TH2 performance of vacuum tube, which makes no sense at all. And we do a lot of compromises in the solid state end to please this, to play along with this, which I think is wrong.
The reviewers, when they do measurements, they accept a great deal of distortion in tube equipment, so why would there be any different standard for solid state?
Well, because solid state automatically you're assumed to be at least an order of magnitude better with a lot of your measurements. That's a thing, and in a lot of cases, this might be interpreted by manufacturers as a must. You have to get this noise figure down, so you use transistors that have large geometries and the gain is terrific, but the bandwidth starts to suck. Then you're in an area of severe problems that never go away. It's like having a coupling capacitor. You'll be forever listening to capacitors. Many years back, my friend at JBL suggested that we should really charge bias the capacitors in a network. So then at JBL for the high-end stuff, that's what they did. And that was a positive because a lot of the capacitor inherent problems went away by biasing. In other words, telling the capacitor that it has to be a capacitor, even at 0 volts.
In the subjective aspect of the audiophile hobby, most people don't care about the measurements. We care about how it sounds. So I wouldn't want you designing just to make reviewers.
I design whichever way I want. I'm just saying that a lot of stuff gets to be cast in concrete, like certain chips that are out there that I know are really not good for sound are there because some people like it. It spreads around. It measures terrific. sounds like crap.
Well, then, if it measures terrific and sounds like crap in subjective audio land, we don't like it.
That's exactly right. That's one of our biggest problems, is that you get judged by that.
Do you think undiagnosed phase problems or group delay problems in systems sometimes are a source of dissatisfaction with the sound of a system?
Well, timing problems are the worst problems in the audio business. Any of that is a timing problem. The phase problem will be a bandwidth problem, and the group delay will be a timing problem of some sort.
And so do you think that is a reason why some people are sometimes dissatisfied with the sound of systems without realizing that it relates to phase or group delay?
That's one of the things with Red Book CD is you have a tremendous amount of phase problems, starting from about, I'd say, a couple of kilohertz on up. Here comes the problem, is that already it's a washout when you get to the higher frequencies where your space comes from, where your higher frequency instruments come from. They lose their stability. Front to back depth it will be limited. This is just something that's proven to my ears and many of my colleagues also in the professional audio business. I don't know how many actual artists I talked to on the way that said they really weren't stimulated to produce a selection of music for Red Book CD.
Have you observed that different power chords affect the sound of your preamplifiers and amplifiers?
I have no idea. I have my standard power chords, which are the molded ones that I like the best. If you have a power supply that's properly done, if the power cord makes a difference, I think you should go back to your power supply design and also your input filtering design, because you're gonna get crap from the wall socket no matter what.
For us, what we do with all of our EMM Labs products is we supply a very good cable with it, i.e. a Kimber PK14 power cable.
With proper connectors, that's more
And
important
proper
than the
connectors.
cable. Yeah.
We've worked with Ray Kimber for many, many years, and we know that he makes a no bullshit, very good cable. So that's what we supply with our high-end gear, and our customers.
It's also approved. Regulatory approval is important.
From a layman's point of view, it might seem that Qobuz streaming packets of digital data might not be very susceptible to modification by the receiving streamer. So why do streamers seem to make a difference in the resulting sound?
Because of jitter problems.
And so
we have a system that jitter simply cannot cross the border. So any source-borne jitter doesn't really matter in our system.
Is that the main thing the NS1 does differently than other streamers?
NS1 has only digital output, so
Yeah.
it depends where we connect it to. If we connect it to our DAC, obviously it should be transparent and neutral.
Our system works kind of like, if you imagine you have a bucket of water, a spout, and you have a faucet that puts water in the bucket. So now you open the faucet and you put in, by opening the faucet and controlling the input, that bucket never over or underflows. That's what we do with the incoming data. Even if it's just one clock stroke apart, the jitter is already blocked 100%. It's not like a PLL, where actually it means phase locked loop. So when the loop is locked, it transmits the phase. That's the whole idea behind it. So now you have a low pass filter at the output of the phase locked loop that makes it very slow. In other words, it attenuates the jitter. But now the problem comes is when you want to listen to satellite radio that shifts frequency ever so slightly, you will get a lot of interruptions.
Mariusz, do you think streaming today achieves equal or better sound than playing either physical CDs or local computer files?
I think it all depends how the files or audio files are prepared. Having high resolution files streamed to our DAC, it's a quality of the file, essentially, the quality of the master. Whatever we get, it should be perfect. If the same file was on a physical medium, we expect the same results.
The bits are the same, hopefully. But a big offender is watermarking, immediately audible.
Mariusz, what do you make of the audiophile fixation with Ethernet switches? People linking one switch to another. Do the switches make a difference in sound in your experience?
90% not, they don't. Perhaps there is some collateral effect of extra buffering because data is being very short term buffered in switches. So maybe there's some fine grain effect due to this, but principally, no. It should not matter.
You see, this is all done because of the jitter problem that does not get eliminated by phase-locked loop inputs into digital converters. I did a lot of research on jitter. I built test equipment. I did exposure to it. I was the one that came up with it, limb detector. And still today, we have jitter boxes like Jello.
I know you've released a new DAC, the DA2i, to replace the DA2 version 2. What
Right.
sonic improvements do you hear in the new DA2i over the prior model?
Big ones.
Quite substantial improvements. I think that it sounds louder, but without increasing the volume. It sounds more present. You have much better low frequency control and slam that hits the bottom of your belly. It sounds absolutely clean, like I've never heard. The DA2i is this new philosophy of the analog board, and it creates that much of a difference. Once you hear it, you cannot go back to what we had before, even though what we had before was very impressive as well.
It's the advantage of having access to our own DAC, so we can do with it whatever we want. And we can marry it to the analog output section exactly the way we want and make changes as we go along and learn something.
Ed, you said in an interview several years ago that you don't believe there's any sonic disadvantage to the DS Audio optical cartridge. That cartridge has evolved over the last several years, so I assume you feel even more strongly that way today. For people who are still using moving coil cartridges, what do you think they are hearing or not hearing that has not won them over with the optical cartridge?
Moving coil is a really unfortunate thing. It's very low output impedance, which is good, but also very low output voltage. The problem I see with a moving coil is that, first of all, they're notorious mistracking cartridges, but that's beside the point. There is 4 coils involved. There is 4 wires coming from the movable part that has acceleration figures up to 1200 Gs at the tip. And the wires are just singing away, and the coils are moving, and the mass is there, and that's why we need diamond, we need boron, and all sorts of stuff. Then we need amplification. So if we do a passive RIAA, which for the high-end audio, I would hope so, we now have 260 dB gain stages in the picture. That's a gain of 1,000,000 to 1.
What speakers do you use at the office?
We have a very one-off pair of JBL Array 1400s that were modified by the designer of those speakers, Greg Timbers. We have 4 pairs of JBL Array 1400s that we have on rotation in different places. And then we also have a pair of Magnapens that we switch in every so often. And then we have a one-off pair of JBL M9500s that we're currently getting refinished. You could say that we're kind of in love with JBL sound, which is to say a little bit no sound. They're a very true
Well, it's kind of a certified measured speaker. It's flat, it's got low distortion, it does what we need. It presents a good load to the amplifiers, so they get stressed.
That's also what we have here. And we have a lot of customers who actually act as ears for us as well. And usually they hear exactly the same thing that we hear. We have one customer that has a cappella trialons. We have a customer who has Alexia V's, customers with Piega, you know, all of these people and what they hear and our trust of their ears as well lets us know that our equipment is relatively speaker agnostic. And I think that that's very important.
What do you guys have going on in the R&D department? What's the next new model update or the next new component we should expect from EMM Labs?
If I have to tell you now, I have to kill you.
I won't tell anybody.
You know, I'll say this, you know, the DA2i and the DV2i are our latest releases, official releases. We also have the MTRX2 V2, which is very recent. We have a DSEQ1 V2 update that is just about to be announced now. We're working on a couple of new products as well that aren't update, but we're constantly fine-tuning and tweaking between Ed, Mariusz, myself, and one of our other employees, Chris. We're constantly fine-tuning what we do because we never consider these products to be finished. And that shows with our long history of our update program, which is, I think, loved by our customers because it means that they don't have to go out and sell their product and buy into the latest and greatest. We offer modularity and upgradability to most, if not all, of our products.
It makes the products living things.
I mean, we have customers that call in because their DCC2 needs to have an update to it, or maybe the power supply dried out because they hadn't used it in a really long time. You know, these are products that are 20 plus years old. They were around when I was a little boy. That longevity of a product is, I think, why we can talk to customers and assure them that once you're welcomed into the EMM Labs and Meitner family, we're able to keep you there because we can continue to advance what we do. And Ed and Mariusz are continually looking for the next best thing to do.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been great.
Thank you, Ron.
Great.
Thank you. Have a good night there.
Okay,
Bye
bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.